It's a real pleasure to have with us today Jennifer McMunn. Jen actually was, again, has worn many hats in History Day world. She was the Mansfield coordinator for many years. She has run the History Day program at Mansfield Middle School, has had a huge amount of success with her students. And we're really glad, this is kind of our last session before we go into lunch. But we kind of designed things so the morning would be a lot of thinking about, well, how do you work with the students? How do you get them started? And then the afternoon, we're gonna have some fun and think about historical resources.
Fun.
Yes, it will be fun. Yeah. We're gonna move around a lot because we're going to be all full from lunch, but this is really fun. And I'm really glad Jen is here to be able to share her expertise because she has really had phenomenal success at Mansfield and getting her students engaged in doing local research. So she's going to kind of help all of you with thinking about how to kick off History Day in your schools.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. So a little bit about me. I'm excited to be your last presenter before lunch, and I don't have swag like Ashley to be on this one handout. I don't have a nice blazer on like Drew. So I'm just sort of here to talk about History Day. So I've been at Mansfield Middle School this is my 20th year. I've had students competing in History Day every year. My first 11 years at Mansfield Middle School, I was a 7th grade social studies teacher. So I supported History Day at our school. The History Day students worked with the enrichment teacher. So I collaborated on the program. And then for the past 9 years, I've been our school's enrichment teacher. Enrichment is a little bit different than gifted and talented in that it's built on the philosophy that all students have gifts and talents and that a teacher should work to foster students' passions and skills for really everybody in the building. So I try to reach as many students as possible in my role. And part of that is I work with classroom social studies teachers now to run our History Day program. My 9th year, I've had kids go to nationals every single year that I've done this. Right. And I really think, and I'm going to talk about this, it's not me. I get to be the face of the program, which is fun, and people say good job when they see me in public. But there are a lot of conditions within the school that I think our Board of Ed, our administration, my colleagues, our parents that they support that make our raw material really excellent. I tell the students this, you make us look good. And a lot of it is the climate that we have at our school. That's my contact info. It is also on my sheet. I'm talking a little bit about logistics of how to set up a program and some options that I've seen work in other districts. Feel free to contact me if you have questions, or I'm going to show you some of the materials I use. Even if you want copies to modify for your own students, feel free to do that. So these are the topics I'm going to address today. They're also on the handout. So conditions in a school that I think really make for a breeding ground for a successful program. Different models for how to work with kids. I've heard a lot today, but I think that's one thing that if you read this, you might wonder, where do I find my students and how do I recruit students to do History Day? Logistics. So once you have your group of participants, how do you manage them? I'll tell you the key word is what Drew said, check-ins, frequent check-ins. That is the key, especially with middle schoolers. How can I make this a rich and rewarding experience? It is tied to a contest, but I truly believe you have to see it as more than just a contest and not just have the kids focus on placing in the contest. It can be richer than that, and there are many ways that you can help facilitate that as a teacher. And then the last thing I'll talk about is how do you sustain your program and grow it over time. So, equity, my plug. I think like a lot of us, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on my own teaching practice. I went to an Equity Institute last summer, and I truly believe that any student can have a successful History Day experience. It's going to look different for each student in terms of what success is, but any student can have a rewarding time. On the left there, we have Aram. He's been kind of his mom took that picture last year. It was him finding out that he qualified for nationals in his living room. And I've seen it used everywhere. So he's kind of like the poster boy of History Day right now. Aram has an IEP. and he qualified for National History Day last year. He has pretty severe dyslexia, but he became so invested in his topic. He did a website on the Hello Girls, so the women who ran the switchboard in World War I. He was also a remote learner for most of last year, so I met with him over Zoom. We conferenced in the spring, and he had a list of questions to ask me for the conference, so he came prepared. And at one point he said to me, no one knows their story and what they did. I don't even care if I win at the contest. I just want more people to know what they did and to get their story out there. And it was one of those moments as a teacher where you chills, where you're like, this kid is doing this for the right reason. And his mom emailed me in the summer and said, even after nationals, he contacted Blumenthal and Chris Murphy because there's a bill in Congress about providing federal recognition for the Hello Girls. And so he wrote to our local lawmakers about supporting that bill. So this is a kid here who academics are tough for him. His report card isn't always all A's. He's not the kid getting awards at the end of the year banquet. And he not only qualified for nationals, his first time ever doing History Day, by the way, but he took it beyond the contest and made real change in the world, and he feels like he got a story out there that hadn't been told. So he's a huge success. Here we have Grace and Lorelei. Lovely, adorable little girls. Grace has a 504. Lorelei has an IEP. They did History Day every year. They were eligible at Mansfield Middle School, so grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. Lorelei is a fantastic artist. She really is the brains behind the design here. For these two, again, academic success isn't something they see in traditional classes. They love History Day. They never made it out of regionals. They didn't care. They were just so happy to be there. They're the kind of girls that what they know isn't always reflected in writing. So they're the ones when you interview them, the judges like, I wish that was written in the project somewhere. This is on women and bicycles. They knew so much when you talk to them. Their board was beautiful. They were so proud of themselves. They really had a successful History Day experience, and their parents will still say that's one of their shining moments in school. And they were too, when they signed up to do History Day with me, teachers said, oh, those two, like, that's nice that they're interested, but they're not going to finish a project. And they did it 3 years in a row. So that's my equity plug. So our school program looks really successful. It's not just me. I think that we have a climate at Mansfield Middle School that makes it possible for kids to choose to do History Day, to believe that they can be successful doing it. And I think that if you have an on-ramp where kids can engage in really rigorous academic work in a variety of subject areas, that's really helpful. If you can do project-based learning in multiple subject areas. So in 5th grade, our kids all do a solar cooker project-based learning experiment where they have to come up with a question about making something that cooks cookies with the sun outside, like chocolate chip cookies, and some catch on fire and some are raw. But they go through the entire inquiry arc. I mean, it's in science, but that gets them excited about research, about working in groups, about designing a project themselves, having autonomy. They have a showcase night where parents get to see what they've done. I think it's those experiences in younger grades that make kids willing to go and try History Day. We've done a lot of work in the past few years on growth mindset. So when you're a student and you're faced with a difficult task, how do you choose to engage? What strategies can you use when something's difficult? And I think that goes a long way. It's been said before, it's no secret that History Day is a lot of work. And for a 6th grader trying to read a primary source that's a translation that's well beyond the reading level, it can get really frustrating. So if as a school district, you can give students some strategies for how to respond when something becomes emotionally, difficult for them, when it's challenging academically, I think that goes a long way for getting them to even want to try History Day. I know that, we'll talk about this in just a minute, some schools have all students do a History Day project. At our school, it's entirely optional. They can choose to opt in if they want. And so I think these types of experiences, when I introduce History Day to my kids, they say, yeah, that sounds like something I can do. We're a small school. We only have about 130 kids a grade. And I introduced this in 6th, 7th, and 8th. And before COVID, I had 80 kids opt in of all different, academic ability levels. So they said, this sounds like something I can do. I had success with the solar cooker. I presented on sustainability in 6th grade. I know how to do this. I've designed a website. I can do this for you. Options for how to manage participants and find participants. And there are probably other models that other schools use that aren't even up here. First one, and I kind of named them like a little menu here. This is middle school. Gimmicky. Yes, we do. So the springboard would be if you have all of your students participate in History Day in some capacity. Maybe it's in one grade, maybe it's in one course. It sounds like Hale Ray has all students participate all 3 years, which I feel like is a huge, very lofty, ambitious goal. So kudos to you guys.
Background on that, high school social studies department came down and yelled at us. The kids can't read, they can't do a primary source, they can't do a secondary, they can't do argumentative writing, they can't.
Oh, we've had that. Do you teach them to write full sentences? And I'm like, no, they can write the script show.
But what we reflected, we were sending them on for hair. And that's why we went to History Day.
Okay.
Our librarian talked to us about it. She retired now, but she's like, everything's in this package. And that's why we, jumped onto the principals, and now they're successful entering high school, ready for all teachers and all argumentative writing and research-based projects.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, because it really is. When you look at the C3 inquiry arc, like that's History Day. It's the entire gamut of inquiry arc in one, again, as you said, package that's ready to go for you. I've also seen it where we tried this in 8th grade, where all students do a part or an abbreviated version of the project. I know I have friends at Manchester High School, they used to do something like that, where all kids did kind of a mini version of History Day. And then if you wanted to take your project and refine and enhance it for the real contest, you could do that. The way we do it at our school is the self-select, where I, as the enrichment teacher, go to all social studies classes in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I tell them about the program. I show them photos. There's a little peer pressure. Look at all the kids before you have done this. And then if they want to do History Day, they write me an essay and just explain what topic they picked and who they want to work with, if anybody. And then I pull them out of class once a week and they come to my room and they work on History Day there. Last year, we ended up doing it as a club. And I've seen some schools, I have a friend in Fairfield who ran it as a club. This was mostly because we had Mansfield, about 30% of our school population was remote at one point in the year. Also last year, like many enrichment teachers, I was reassigned to the classroom simply to keep class sizes down for COVID protocol. So I was 8th grade classroom last year. So I ran our program as a Zoom club after school. So the kids Zoomed from 4 to 5 with me. And I had 14 kids qualify for nationals. So it sounded, I was so nervous that they just weren't going to have enough time. How are they going to be motivated? It's over Zoom. It somehow worked. I do think it's because I had the program up and running beforehand, but that is an option you can do, or if you have a flex period in your day, maybe you could run it then. The other option I've heard some kids or some schools do, and this is not my favorite, but I do have to say it, is the gifted and talented option, where you have a pre-selected pool of students, or perhaps your school has a gifted track and those kids engage in History Day. Again, I strongly believe in equity and that any kid can do History Day. So this wouldn't personally be my choice, but I do know some schools have gifted programs that are very fixed and they run their program that way. Managing participants, once you have it. I have figured this out through trial and error, I will say. Through years of realizing kids did their entire project the night before it was due. Phone calls from parents about crying children late into the night. Surprises when you think an exhibit is in good shape and then it appears at the contest and it looks quite different than you had anticipated. So as Drew said, check-ins are your friends. What I do is I set up a timeline that I give all students in the beginning. I check in with them every week or two. The invention of Google Classroom has been transformative because now I have them keep all their documents in Google Classroom and I can spy on what they're doing. That's why I was saying before, the website is my favorite category because I can see what they're doing. Sometimes the documentaries and exhibits, there's a little bit of, I'm doing this at home and I'm not quite sure what's going to appear at the contest. So these are some of the tools that I use. And again, I can make these available. So I have my students do all their notes in one place. And this might be a little bit prescriptive for high schoolers, where they have maybe a little bit of freedom in terms of how they want to take notes. And I do tell kids, if this system really doesn't work for you, and you have another way where I can see what you're doing, go for it. I do have some kids that still prefer paper, and I have them attach photos in Google Classroom, so just I can see it. They number their sources. That's just simply so that I can keep track of where they're at. They have to categorize it as primary or secondary. They bullet all the information in the box. I have a spot for their citation, a spot for their annotation, and that link there is to an example so they can see one from a previous year. This just really makes it easy for me to see their note-taking process as they go. I tell groups, just work off one student's document and share it so that they're all doing notes in one place. A lot of my students will color code the group member by font type. So you'll see in the photo, like Sarah is Helvetica, Elena is Arial. So you can tell which student took which note.
That's crazy.
Yes, it's prescriptive, but for middle schoolers, I also believe it's our job to teach them how to be a researcher and not just assume that they're coming to us with those skills. Yeah.
Well, I think this is great because I'm sure you notice this too. But if they don't have a template or something to use, then they get a source or they find a source and they do all this work and then they don't know where they got it from. And go all the way back and then they can't remember and then it's like torture.
And they don't believe me when I'm like, you have to do the citations as you go.
Yeah.
I got it. And I don't know.
Yeah, it's so important.
So I can see if a kid takes notes from 5 sources and the citations are either incomplete or they're missing, I can stop them right there before they have 15 sources
Yeah.
about it.
Do you have them do their annotation also in advance?
I have them do it as they go, yes, but I tell them they're going to revise it because at the start,
Yeah.
you don't know how this particular source is going to influence your final project. But just to get kind of a record of how to use it initially, because again, they're not going to remember. I've seen that at the end. So that's one structure. The other one, I tell them this is the VIP document, is the timeline. I have 2-week chunks, what you should be doing every 2 weeks. And then I check in with them at the end of that period.
There is a timeline in the educator and student handbook that's broken out into 8, 12-week and 15-week timelines. So depending on how you're using it in your classroom, it's broken down not so much by calendar dates, but a number of weeks to accomplish things. So that's there for you as well.
Yeah. So I do research first, then thesis, then they write their project, then I have to walk them through registration, which gives some time for that because I found, again, they can't multitask if they're focusing on registering and arguing over their title. It's probably a week where a lot of writing research isn't gonna get done. Annotated bibliography and process paper, and you also need to make sure, or project creations in there too, that you're leaving enough time for yourself to give feedback. Because then they have to take your feedback as the adult or whoever's working with them to make all the changes that when you rip apart their thesis, they have to go change it. Yes,
Sorry, I have a question.
go ahead.
As far as like the topic selection, how much time do you generally spend on that? And are you finding that students are having a hard time coming up with the topic, or do you see that as being something that's challenging, and also picking something and they start researching and then they kind of switch over and do
Yeah.
something different? Does that happen a lot with you?
It does. So I usually introduce, I go in and do my show in social studies classes in October. And then they have about a month to decide to commit. So during that time, we have a flex period. If a kid, I tell a student, if you want to do history day, topics shouldn't stop you. So they can come and see me and ask for advice. I also make it a whole school event. So I say, if you're interested in a music topic, go see our choral director. He's got a wealth of knowledge about music history, and he suggested really great jazz singers that I've never heard of. So I let kids know who the experts are in the building in terms of finding a topic. I do let them change within the first few weeks because I tell them you have to love your topic and there has to be a lot of information about it. And sometimes from their initial research, they might think something sounds really good. And then after a little bit of initial research, they're like, well, the theme tie isn't there. Or some of my kids who want to do well pick these really specific topics, like a local history topic that sounds dynamo, but there just isn't information on it. So I do let them change, and I tell them that's natural in research. We all do that. We go down one avenue and then say, oh, that's not going to work, and we back up. So I definitely allow for that. Yeah. I also structure thesis, the writing, the process paper. I just give them little templates with questions about what you should answer and have in it. And I think of it like bumper bowling. You want your kids to have the bumpers and the structure, and then within that, they have the creativity and the license to explore their topic and to present their thinking in whatever way that works because you've given them those parameters. They're not figuring out the how so that they can focus on the what. Rich, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Can I see your thesis organizer?
Oh,
There's gonna be the hardest part.
no, it is. There's a really good video I found. It's from Minnesota. So it's Minnesota. And
What's your point?
no, I said, so one year I was at Nationals. Minnesota's a fantastic history day program. And I said, I was judging at Nationals on my 40th birthday, which was like nerd glory. I was so excited. And there was a guy from Minnesota at my table, and I said, my theory is that because you must have nothing else to do in the winter, you just dive into history day, and the projects are so good. He said, actually, I think that's true.
I grew up in Minnesota and I did not know about History Day until I moved to Connecticut.
It's crazy.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
So this is typically what I give them, and I have them do this after they've done some research, but not all of it. So I tell them your thesis needs to include a little bit of context, the scene connection, and this one was for breaking barriers, why it's important, and then you're going to stick it all together. So I have them write out each sentence, and then they form a thesis, and then I rip it apart, and then they go back and do it again. So thank you. You're welcome. But yeah, and they do look different because a thesis in a paper is going to look different than a thesis on an exhibit. But it works. So, rich and rewarding History Day experience. If you want your kids to see this as an opportunity to become historians, we did a school survey last year. We always do it with our kids, and we saw over and over again that students did not see connections between what they were learning in school and the real world. So, why am I learning this? It's a big question that middle schoolers ask. So, I think the more that you can tie this beyond school and to professional historians' craft, the more success you will have in buy-in. Kids love, especially middle schoolers, anything that seems real and official. So if you can just highlight that Connecticut History Day or National History Day is something that happens all over the country. I know at my school, we have multiple teachers who have done it when they were little. So one in North Carolina even. So when you can get other professionals in your building to say, oh yeah, I did History Day, I remember my topic. Invite the Connecticut History Day staff in or send kids to workshops. Once I get my participant list and I make an email base, I'm always sending them information about the different CTHD offerings so that they know that this is something they can go to. Many of them do take people up on those offers. So that's good to make that professional connection. I think connect with your local archivists. We heard about libraries, people at universities that might want to conduct interviews. I'm in the same town that UConn's in. So in our pre-COVID world, we every year would take our History Day kids to UConn. They liked eating in the student union. But we would go to the library, and I would have one of the librarians give a talk to the kids about how to use the database there. And I would also take them to the archives. You build your network over time. The archivist at UConn, both their sons did history with me, so then we had this nice connection at UConn. Our UConn partner right now, Mark Healy, his daughter did history day with me, so get people involved once you've got parents who know about the program. And you'd give her a list of the kids' topics. She would find really cool sources, primary she had them for every single kid. And they would sit in a leatherback chair at a library table with a document, or in one case, a book that they had to wear gloves because it was so old. And they're 11 years old and thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. So anything like that, where you can make it an experience, just really gets kids excited beyond I'm doing this for a contest.
And if you're in Hartford area, the Hartford History Center is in the public library. And when Kara and I worked together at the same school, and we would go on field trips, and they were amazing. And the kids they got to experience, touch, and microfiche was like their most fun. Like they learned how to use a microfiche machine, and it was epic. It was so fun. Yeah.
It makes it real for them.
And I can tell
Yeah.
you, local museums and historical societies and such are so happy to help your students, even if you can't bring them there. Think about calling them, because they, all the emails and calls saying, Rebecca, I helped a History Day student today, and they're so excited to share that.
They are. I also think finding a showcase for all projects beyond the contest is really important. As I showed you with Grace and Lorelai, not every kid makes it out of regionals. Not every kid cares about making it out of regionals. And I believe that those students need to be celebrated just as much as the students who qualify for nationals. So if you can set up a gallery in your school, last year with the nature of COVID, I made a website where each student had a section, and I shared that with staff and parents. Showcase your History Day students in newsletters. Our Mansfield library, I always call them, and we set up the exhibits in the library for people to see. So just make it real so that kids can have some moment of pride when they complete the program. Because I tell the kids, I did a marathon once. I wasn't fast, but guess what? I ran a marathon. I said, History Day is the same thing. It's an academic marathon. You should feel really good about simply completing it. Two little gals at the UConn archives. This photo is when they were in 6th grade. They went to nationals. They didn't go. No one went to nationals, but they qualified last year. But yeah, they're look at them. They got a primary source. They're looking at a book. They're in the Dodd Center at 12 years old. It's cool. Inviting kids to Connecticut History Day events. This is my middle school crew that qualified for nationals last year. They went to the celebration at Timothy Edwards. Yeah, and they got to leave school early. A bunch of them planned, so these two work together. They planned to wear their History Day shirts to school. It was a thing. Erin wore his medal to school. She was like, I have a medal. So yeah, they were so excited to go there. Yeah. Sustaining and growing your program. So once you've done it 1 year, how do you ensure longevity? Publicize your program, publicize success, get older kids to talk to younger kids. Last year, so E.O. Smith, the high school in my town, doesn't have a full History Day program, so the kids often come back and work with me. I had high schoolers who had done History Day come back and talk to the middle schoolers, and they said, everything Ms. McMunn tells you to do it. Whenever we ignored her, it would always appear in our judges' feedback. She actually knows what she's talking about. Thank you. One of my colleagues, both of his daughters went to Stanford. They both did History Day when they were in middle school. And he said it was the most rigorous academic experience they had ever. They will say, including Stanford.
Wow.
So he will always tell kids that, and I applaud him for saying that to them. But they say history was the richest thing we ever did as learners, bar none. I always put on our morning announcements, History Day information, who's doing it. And again, I don't just emphasize the winners. I'll talk about other projects as well. Get parents and teachers involved in the process. I usually send out a parent letter about how to give feedback because as we talked about with what is reasonable help, I find that something especially middle schoolers parents don't know. They'll say, how much can I help the kid on their project? So I give them tips on how to frame that. I also talk to them about what to do when your child's having a meltdown. So how to support students emotionally through a difficult journey. I'll say it is difficult. Difficult isn't scary. You can help your kid through this and they'll come out better on the other side. So get parents involved. And then many of those parents I found become professional allies for the program later on, and it's great. Or if they're teachers, I've had parents who are teachers in other districts take it on at their own school because they've seen their kid at Mansfield go through the program. And as I said, get students to act as ambassadors. They're really the best ones to go out and get siblings involved. Yes.
I just want to add that we have our kids go to the Board of Ed meeting every
Yep,
single year.
do that
And
too.
the Board of Ed members love to have the kids. We've had them present a performance, we've had them bring exhibits. It's, the Board of Ed looks forward to it. They ask every year if we can bring the kids by, so I would recommend that.
I agree. Yeah, we do that too. And they say it's always towards the end of the school year. So it's when fraught conversations are happening around budgets and programming. So they love good news at Board of Ed meetings. So if you're not feeling invited, ask. Yeah. Be that squeaky wheel.
Another place you can have the students share their work is sometimes if the content is from a museum. For instance, a couple years ago, we had a bunch of projects that were on Carolyn Faraday that and her work with helping Polish women who had been experimented on during World War II to get recognition. And so the Bellamy Faraday House hosted their exhibits. And so their work got displayed to the public for a couple of months. So that's also a place that we can think of.
Yeah, no, I've had, I think a Prudence Crandall exhibit went to the Prudence Crandall house. I had, yeah, so the local museums.
Do you have any suggestions for performances? Because, you know, sometimes you do performances and then they can show them up to the school, but beyond that, it's like, okay, let's do more with this.
I would recommend going out to your local library if they want to do a program, or to a museum, you know, as part of a program, and also with us, because we often want to showcase that, and you know, hopefully as we get back into real world, but we often participate in Connecticut Open House Day, which is in early June, and so we'd love to have student performances. So yeah, and if it's possible to have it recorded, that's really nice, because I find oftentimes by default the students don't understandably don't remember the script.
Right. But that's what I did show it last year. I had recordings that were linked on the website so that the public could watch performances even if they couldn't go. Any other questions about my program or middle school and history day? Or lunch?
Jen, thank you so much for sharing.